What's up you guys, Charles here and welcome back to the channel. In today's video we're going to talk about what an index fund is and how do they work. Now before we go over any of this, you need to understand what an index is. An example of an index is the S&P 500. So this index measures the top 500 companies in the US. So the performance of the S&P 500 is directly related to the performance of the top 500 companies that the S&P 500 measures. So for example, if the top 500 companies of the US do well one year, the S&P 500 will do equally well that year. Now what is a fund? A fund is slightly more simple to explain. It's essentially a bunch of people that pool their money together and give it to someone or an algorithm, in the case of an index fund, so that they can buy more shares in the company. For example, if you were to go buy the shares in each of the 500 top companies in the USA, it costs you a huge amount because you have to pay transaction fees every time you buy them. But with a pool of money, you can buy more shares and own all of them for a cheaper price. Now you have to be very careful when you're buying into funds because there are two types of funds. There's a mutual fund, these are bad, and there's an index funds, these are good. The reason mutual funds are bad is because they're actively managed. This means that when you put the money into a fund, you have a group of professionals that invest and stock pick for you to try beat the index. Now the problem with these types of funds is they very rarely even beat the index. On top of that, every time they buy a stock and sell it for a profit, they have to pay something called capital gains tax. So when you put your money in, essentially, you're getting taxed every time they make a trade, which then means you're losing out on some of the profit you could have made. Now on top of that, mutual funds are a lot more expensive than index funds, because since you're paying someone to actively manage it, they take a percentage of whatever you put in. And if you haven't seen my video on compound interest and how it can make you rich, you can just see it up here. But the thing is that compound interest can work both ways. When you invest in the stock market and you make an average of 7% return per year, that compounds and that works for you because your money is increasing in value and you're making your money work for you. However, these percentages that the active managers of these funds charge compound over time, which means that since you're investing in these funds that have a high charge compared to other funds such as index funds, you're losing money more and more over time, and it means that if you invest in a lower cost fund, such as an index fund, you'd be saving a lot of money. Now if you don't want to take my word for it, because I'm just some random guy on the internet, take the word of Warren Buffett. In 2007, he invested $1 million on a bet against the Protégé Partners, which are essentially one of the biggest hedge funds in America, and bet that the S&P 500 index fund would beat these hedge funds. And guess what? He won his bet. Now, what is so amazing about these index funds? As I've said before, the costs honestly are so low, and they're sometimes around 0.14% if you invest in Vanguard index funds. That's a huge benefit. But another benefit, and you should know if you're going to invest, one of the biggest rules in investing is diversification. And when you're buying an index fund, you're essentially buying 500 of the top US companies. So that's a huge diversification. Now since you are invested in the top 500 companies in the US, if Amazon, which is known as the biggest and probably one of the most reliable companies in the US stock market, were to crash, you'd still have those other 499 companies to cover your portfolio. Now since you've taken Warren Buffett and my advice, obviously, to invest in index funds, and it costs such a little amount, you can now not only diversify by owning the top 500 companies in America, you can diversify by owning the top 500 companies in America, the top 100 companies in the UK, the top emerging markets, the index fund for the whole world sometimes. And if you're betting that America's going to improve, you can bet on the index fund will improve also. If you bet that the UK's economy and stock market will improve, then your fund will also improve. And in the long term, if you think the world's going to improve, then you can buy an index fund that covers the world and the fact that it's going to improve. And guess what? Index funds aren't only for stocks, they can also be for bonds, different types of bonds, gold, commodities, all sorts of things. This enables you to diversify by country, by companies, by asset class, and it's just an amazing investment. Now, what you need to remember when investing in an index fund is you should be investing for a minimum of 5 years really. On this channel I promote more of a 30-40 year approach because the demographic is a lot lower, and it means that they'll have more time to grow and it should be money for when you retire. If you're investing for less than that and you need the money at hand, I'd invest in a more secure thing like a bond, or even just leave it in cash and in a savings account. Now, Vanguard offers a bunch of index funds, and no, don't worry, I'm not sponsored by Vanguard, although I wish I were. But Vanguard offers one of the lowest platform fees, also has one of the lowest index funds costs. So you should really consider looking into them. And remember that first you need diversification. Index funds provide these. Don't just diversify in one S&P 500 index fund. Diversify in different asset classes such as gold, commodities, bonds, stocks, and you should also diversify around countries if you think that that's necessary. Different countries offer different risks and different returns. For example, if you were to invest in emerging market index funds, you'd probably get a higher return, but you'd also have to stomach more of a risk. And if you don't want to do that, then invest in the S&P 500, which is considered as one of the least risky stock markets with an average and consistent growth. You should always look at the costs, and since the costs are so low for index funds, you should invest in those. On top of that, Warren Buffett also says that you should smash that like button because it really helps me and the channel reach more people, and I'd really appreciate it. Now, if you've made it this far, thank you so much for watching my video, and if you've gained any value, I'd really appreciate it if you did smash that like button and subscribe if you want more content on this. Now, a book I'd advise for you to read that talks about personal finance and just in general investing is Money Master the Game by Tony Robbins. Now, it's quite a long book, around 600 or 700 pages I think, if I remember well. There's a slightly shorter version called Unshakeable. I'll leave both links in the description. But if I were you, I would really invest in learning more about it before you start investing. And remember, invest in index funds, not mutual funds. Don't forget to subscribe, and see you later.